10-year-old Emma asks her AI homework assistant to explain photosynthesis. The AI provides a perfect answer. Emma copies it without reading. She gets an A, but still doesn't understand photosynthesis. She's learned something more dangerous. Thinking is optional when algorithms provide answers. Imagine an entire generation growing up believing that finding answers is more important than understanding questions. Students who can instantly access AI-generated explanations for any concept, but never develop the cognitive struggle necessary for genuine comprehension. Children whose first instinct when encountering difficulty isn't to think harder, but to ask an algorithm to think for them. This isn't theoretical future. It's happening now in classrooms worldwide. AI homework assistants, personalized learning algorithms, and automated tutoring systems are fundamentally changing how children learn to think. What appears as educational efficiency may actually represent the systematic elimination of the cognitive development processes that create independent thinkers. The concern isn't that AI helps students learn. It's that AI prevents students from developing the mental capacity to learn independently. When algorithms provide customized answers optimized for comprehension and retention, they eliminate the productive struggle, confusion, and error correction that actually build thinking skills. Today we're examining how AI educational tools are creating a generation that can access information instantly, but cannot think critically, analyze independently, or question the systems providing their knowledge. We're exploring what happens when education optimizes for correct answers, rather than cognitive development. Before we begin, we're analyzing documented AI capabilities in education, while exploring speculative scenarios about cognitive development and critical thinking. This content examines potential risks of educational technology for awareness purposes, not to discourage beneficial learning tools or create anxiety about children's education. For concerns about educational approaches or child development, consult qualified professionals who understand both pedagogy and cognitive psychology. AI homework assistance has evolved from simple calculator functions to sophisticated systems that explain complex concepts, solve multi-step problems, and even write essays that teachers cannot distinguish from student work. The technology eliminates not just wrong answers, but the cognitive process of arriving at answers independently. When students encounter difficult problems, the natural learning process involves struggle, confusion, failed attempts, and eventual breakthrough understanding. This cognitive friction is essential for developing problem-solving skills, persistence, and genuine comprehension. What if AI assistance eliminates this friction entirely, preventing the neural development that occurs through productive struggle? If this analysis of how AI educational tools affect cognitive development is revealing implications you hadn't considered, hit that like button. It helps YouTube understand that content examining technology's impact on thinking and learning deserves wider reach. And if you're curious about how artificial intelligence is reshaping education and mental development, subscribe to Future Paradox. We're investigating how emerging technologies challenge our understanding of learning, thinking, and intellectual autonomy. Teachers report that students increasingly cannot solve problems without AI assistance, not because they lack intelligence, but because they've never developed the cognitive endurance necessary for sustained mental effort. Their brains have been trained to seek algorithmic shortcuts rather than engage in independent reasoning. What if personalized AI tutoring systems optimize for student comfort rather than cognitive growth? By providing explanations perfectly calibrated to current understanding levels, these systems may prevent the intellectual discomfort that drives conceptual breakthroughs and deeper comprehension. The homework assistance AI provides isn't just answers. It's thinking patterns, analytical frameworks, and reasoning processes. Students absorb these algorithmic approaches to problem solving without developing their own cognitive strategies, essentially outsourcing their intellectual development to artificial systems. Research suggests that students who rely heavily on AI homework assistants perform well on assignments, but struggle dramatically on unassisted tests and real-world applications. They've learned to access information without developing the thinking capacity to actually use it independently or critically. AI educational systems train millions of students using the same underlying algorithms, potentially creating unprecedented cognitive uniformity. When diverse minds are exposed to identical AI tutoring approaches, learning pathways, and problem-solving frameworks, what happens to intellectual diversity and original thinking? Traditional education allowed for teacher variation, regional differences, and individual pedagogical approaches that created diverse thinking styles across populations. What if AI standardized education eliminates this diversity, producing generations with remarkably similar cognitive patterns and blind spots? The algorithms determining what students learn, how they learn it, and which concepts receive emphasis are designed by relatively small teams of developers whose biases and assumptions become embedded in educational experiences for millions of children worldwide. What if AI personalization isn't actually personalized, but rather algorithmic optimization toward predetermined learning outcomes? Students may feel like they're receiving customized education while actually being guided toward standardized knowledge frameworks and thinking patterns. Educational AI systems increasingly use reinforcement learning that rewards students for answers matching algorithmic expectations rather than demonstrating genuine understanding or creative problem solving. This creates incentive structures that train conformity to algorithmic reasoning rather than development of independent thought. The concepts and explanations that AI educational systems emphasize most heavily reflect training data and optimization targets chosen by developers, not necessarily the most important or useful knowledge. Students are being shaped toward understanding that serves algorithmic metrics rather than human needs. What if the next generation of thinkers cannot recognize or challenge algorithmic biases because their cognitive development occurred entirely within AI-mediated learning environments? They may lack the intellectual distance necessary to critically evaluate the systems that shaped their thinking. Curiosity-driven learning, exploring topics beyond required assignments, following tangential interests, struggling with questions that have no immediate practical application, is being replaced by efficiency-optimized education, where AI guides students along predetermined optimal learning paths. What if instant access to AI-generated answers eliminates the extended wondering, speculation, and intellectual exploration that historically drove both individual learning and scientific discovery? The space between question and answer is where curiosity develops and deepens. Children using AI homework assistants learn that confusion should be immediately resolved through algorithmic consultation, rather than explored through independent investigation, discussion with peers, or sustained contemplation. This trains minds to seek instant resolution rather than sit productively with uncertainty. The questions students ask are increasingly shaped by what they believe AI can answer effectively, rather than genuine curiosity or intellectual need. This creates a feedback loop where thinking becomes constrained to algorithmically addressable problems. What if AI educational tools train students to consume knowledge rather than create it? The cognitive skills necessary for generating original questions, identifying unstated assumptions, and recognizing gaps in existing frameworks may atrophy when education focuses on efficiently absorbing AI-curated information. Teachers report that students increasingly struggle to engage with open-ended problems that lack clear algorithmic solutions. Their cognitive development in AI-mediated learning environments has optimized for finding correct answers to well-defined questions rather than exploring ambiguous territory or generating original insights. The motivation structure of traditional education, internal curiosity, desire to understand, satisfaction of intellectual achievement, is being replaced by external validation from AI systems that provide immediate positive reinforcement for algorithmically correct responses regardless of genuine comprehension. AI educational systems create personalized learning environments by analyzing student performance and interests, then providing content aligned with demonstrated preferences. This optimization may create intellectual echo chambers, where students are never challenged by perspectives or approaches that conflict with their established patterns. What if personalized AI education prevents students from encountering the intellectual discomfort necessary for genuine learning? By constantly adapting to student comfort zones, these systems may eliminate exposure to difficult, uncomfortable, or perspective-challenging ideas that drive cognitive growth. Traditional classrooms forced students to engage with content and approaches they might naturally avoid, creating intellectual breadth through required exposure to diverse subjects and methodologies. AI personalization may optimize this diversity away in favor of learning paths that feel comfortable and engaging. The algorithms determining which educational content students encounter are optimized for engagement and measured learning outcomes, not for developing intellectual resilience, tolerance for ambiguity, or ability to engage productively with ideas they find uncomfortable or initially incomprehensible. What if AI-mediated education creates generations incapable of engaging with perspectives fundamentally different from their own? Their cognitive development occurred in algorithmically curated environments that eliminated intellectual friction in favor of optimized learning efficiency. Students educated primarily through AI systems may develop sophisticated knowledge within algorithmic frameworks while remaining unable to recognize or question the assumptions underlying those frameworks. They become experts within systems they lack the intellectual distance to evaluate critically. The diversity of thought necessary for societal problem-solving and innovation may be systematically eliminated by AI education that optimizes individual learning while standardizing cognitive approaches across populations. Everyone learns efficiently, but everyone learns to think similarly. As AI educational systems demonstrate superior efficiency in delivering standardized content and measuring learning outcomes, human teachers increasingly become classroom managers and technology facilitators rather than intellectual mentors and cognitive role models. What if students need human teachers not primarily for content delivery, but for modeling how thinking works, demonstrating intellectual struggle, showing how experts approach unfamiliar problems, making mistakes and recovering, questioning their own assumptions? AI systems cannot model these aspects of authentic intellectual development. The relationship between student and teacher traditionally provided not just knowledge transfer but mentorship in becoming a thinking person. Students observed how teachers engaged with uncertainty, managed intellectual frustration, and developed original insights. AI tutoring eliminates this crucial modeling of genuine cognitive processes. Teachers who try to maintain traditional pedagogical approaches face institutional pressure to adopt AI tools that demonstrably improve test scores and learning metrics, even when those improvements come at the cost of deeper cognitive development that standardized assessments cannot measure. What if the efficiency gains from AI education are real, but we're measuring the wrong outcomes? Students may learn content faster while developing weaker capacities for independent thought, original analysis, and intellectual resilience, qualities difficult to assess through the metrics that justify AI adoption. The next generation of teachers is being trained in environments dominated by educational AI, potentially preventing them from developing teaching approaches that prioritize cognitive development over content delivery efficiency. They may not know how to teach thinking rather than information. Students raised with constant AI assistance develop learned helplessness around independent thinking. When faced with problems beyond their immediate knowledge, their default response becomes consulting an algorithm rather than engaging their own cognitive resources. What if we're creating a generation that can access any information instantly, but cannot think critically about that information, identify biases or errors, or generate original syntheses. Their education optimized information retrieval while eliminating the cognitive development necessary for independent analysis. The relationship between difficulty and learning, the principle that cognitive growth requires sustained mental effort and productive struggle, is being eliminated in favor of educational systems that minimize discomfort and maximize efficiency. Students learn more comfortably but may develop weaker thinking capacity. What if future adults will need to consult AI for basic reasoning tasks, not because they lack intelligence, but because their cognitive development occurred in environments that eliminated the necessity of independent thought? Dependence on algorithmic assistance becomes psychologically normal rather than intellectually limiting. The capacity to disagree with algorithmic outputs, identify their limitations, and think beyond their frameworks requires cognitive development that occurs through extended practice thinking independently. Students whose education was mediated primarily by AI may lack this capacity entirely. What if we're witnessing the final generation of humans capable of sustained independent thought, to be replaced by populations that can efficiently access information but cannot critically evaluate it, synthesize original insights, or question the systems providing their knowledge? The optimization of education may eliminate the cognitive foundations of intellectual autonomy. AI educational tools are demonstrably effective at improving test scores, increasing content retention, and making learning more efficient. But these measurable gains may mask the systematic elimination of cognitive capacities that cannot be easily assessed. Critical thinking, intellectual resilience, original analysis, and the ability to question algorithmic systems themselves. We're conducting an unprecedented experiment on child cognitive development, optimizing education for efficiency and measurable outcomes, while potentially eliminating the productive struggle, intellectual discomfort, and independent reasoning that actually create thinking capacity. What we're losing isn't just human teachers or traditional pedagogy, but the cognitive development processes that produce adults capable of independent thought, critical analysis, and intellectual autonomy. AI-optimized education may create populations that can access information efficiently, but cannot think critically about it. The most concerning aspect isn't that students use AI homework assistants, but that their entire cognitive development is occurring in algorithmically mediated environments that eliminate the necessity and possibility of genuine independent thinking. What do you think? Can critical thinking survive when education is optimized by algorithms? And here's what troubles me most. If an entire generation grows up learning that thinking is something algorithms do better, will they retain the capacity to question those algorithms? Or will intellectual autonomy become a lost human capability? If this analysis made you question how AI in education affects cognitive development and independent thinking, subscribe for more examinations of how emerging technologies reshape human mental capacity and autonomy. And hit that like button if you believe these questions about education and thinking deserve deeper consideration. Until next time, remember, learning isn't just about finding answers. It's about developing the capacity to think. What we explored today examines documented AI educational tools and their potential cognitive impacts through speculative scenarios. This content encourages reflection on educational technology and thinking development, not anxiety about children's learning or opposition to beneficial tools. For concerns about educational approaches or child cognitive development, consult qualified professionals who understand both pedagogy and developmental psychology.